So we're starting the recording. This is the first of a series of three shiurim from Madrasha Lindenbaum to help you prepare for Pesach. We're very, very happy to be able to offer shiurim from our amazing faculty, and we thank very much Rabbi David Brofsky for giving the shiur on koshering conundrums, a halacha Q&A in advance of Pesach. So, bevakasha, thank you so much.
Okay, it's great to be here and see everyone, or at least know that they're here somewhere if I don't see them. In any case, I realized a few hours ago that I hadn't fully finalized the topic with Cheryl. Uh, we're going to do the following. I'd like to share a few thoughts about Pesach in the beginning, and then we'll talk about two of the issues which I think cause people a lot of stress on Pesach. I'll leave the inspirational stuff for maybe for my colleagues, but I'd like to obviously, as the title said, focus on koshering and things like that. You know, how to kosher, or different whatever the title said, different challenges of koshering. And then maybe if we have time, we'll talk about cosmetics and medicines and things like that, which also are often challenging for people in terms of trying to figure out what to do with things and medicines and cosmetics and soaps and all things like that. But I want to begin with a few thoughts, not related to koshering per se, but Pesach thoughts. And I think that, we're all sort of thinking this year about Pesach, and obviously we're deep into what's going on in Israel. Some of us are deeper in, I guess, certainly those who live here and who have family either fighting, or maybe we know people who, oh, there you go, I'm still here. Okay. We know people who have been injured or Khalila killed, whatever, meaning, so we're all, engaged in this war in different levels. And the question is, how does that impact at all how this Pesach is going to be, in terms of how we relate to what's going on and the themes of Pesach. So I want to share the following thoughts. Since I think really since October, since Simchas Torah, um, I with all the pain and anxiety and even fear, and my son was in Gaza for 4 or 5 months, and you can imagine the stress that was going on here, and even watching from afar, watching all the anti-Semitism develop around the world, and even in places where, truth is, I always knew that it would develop, um, but it happened much quicker than I thought it would, maybe on college campuses and even in suburbs of New Jersey and New York and whatever, all places like that. I still found myself with the following feeling that I don't think I've ever been prouder, that to be a Jewish person, and that the Torah, that I'm connected to the Torah. And I'll tell you why I think that, and why I think that's connected to Pesach. Meaning, Dafka, at this time, I look around at the people around us and maybe the nations around us. I see obviously the behavior and the values of those who came to attack and to kill and to rape and to pillage our country. But even I look at the reaction from so many people around the world, and I really say to myself, Ashreinu, meaning it's bad to be the persecuted people, but we couldn't be luckier to be those people who have history, who have values, and I really believe that. And I felt that since the beginning of the conflict, and my belief in that has been strengthened every day. I'd like to connect it a little bit to Pesach. If one were to sort of summarize, meaning what is the essence of Pesach? Obviously we focus on Leil HaSeder, and I think it could be, I've mentioned to some of you in different contexts that Sukkot is a much more complicated holiday, both in terms of we're bombarded with different types of mitzvot, trying to figure out what's going on, and also you get the impression from different halachot of Sukkot, the way it's presented in the Torah, that every day is sort of like a new Chag. You have literally 7 separate days, and you have an eighth day. it's like a lot to process and sort of unpack. However, Pesach is much more straightforward, meaning Pesach, there's one, I guess one could say like, evening in which is the climax in terms of our the story of Pesach, and then the rest of it is a Chag and etc. And therefore, if we think about what's at the heart of Pesach, the essence of Pesach, it's obviously Vihigadata. It's obviously some type of story. And if we break down that story, we ask ourselves, well, what is that story? What are the components of that story? What are the characteristics of that story? What am I teaching myself? What am I teaching my children? What am I teaching everyone around the table? And I think that the content of that story has a number of characteristics. And I'll mention a few of them. First of all, it focuses on the Jewish people as a nation, as a people, number one, with history, a very, very long and rich history. Number two, it focuses on the people that are going somewhere, meaning they leave Mitzrayim and they're going to a land that they have a divine promise that that's their land that they have a relationship with. And at times they had the land, at times they were removed from the land, but we have this relationship with this land. And number three, we're people that have a very strong sense of morality that defines us as a people. And the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, in many ways, is the story which is meant to teach us moral lessons. And we didn't just figure this out, but the truth is other religions as well, meaning picked up on that in terms of how Yetzias Mitzrayim is meant to be the moment which has all these moral lessons. And the truth is, the Torah, throughout the Torah, we're told, Ki gerim hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt, and therefore the Torah constantly connects our treatment of others to our experience in Mitzrayim, our treatment of the ger, of the atom, and the almanah, and even when we set slaves free, meaning that they're supposed to take a ma'anak, a certain amount of money and with them, because we treat people differently than the way that we feel that we're treated. In fact, the Sifrei Drush and even Sifrei Chasidus, when they talk about Beitz U'Beruchush Gadol, that we're told that the Jewish people will leave Mitzrayim with great property. So obviously, in Pshuto Shel Mikra, we were told that we left with payment for the years of service that we worked in Mitzrayim. However, many of the Sifrei Drush say the Rechush Gadol of Yetzias Mitzrayim was not the physical Rechush that we left with, but the spiritual Rechush, the Rechush of our relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, but more importantly, the moral lessons that we learn from our experience in Mitzrayim. And that's the Rechush Gadol that we left Mitzrayim with, and that we've brought to the world, I guess one could say, in terms of monotheism and certain very central values that we have. And if we come back to the past, I guess half a year they say literally to this day, and Jewish people are attacked in terms of our relationship to the land and in terms of our morality, and we know that it's all not true. It actually goes against the essence of who we are as a people and the essence of what Pesach teaches us. Pesach teaches us that we have a history and that we have a nation for thousands of years, and that we have a land which is ours, and that we have morality, both in the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat outsiders, the way we treat other people. And that's something that people can accuse us over and over again of not having these values and not having this history. But it's actually Pesach which tells us that none of that's true, meaning that's the nature and the essence of the Jewish people. And in fact, we're even told, meaning those who don't believe that, who don't affirm that, who don't want to participate in that, haket shinav, meaning we don't, even if they're Jewish people, meaning porish min hatzibur, meaning we push them away. We say, listen, if you don't want to be part of our avoda, so don't be part of our avoda. Meaning the denial of these very central principles is part of the essence of being a Jewish person. And I feel I'm looking forward to Pesach because I think it'll just reinforce and give us the opportunity to really spend at least one night, or in Chutz La'aretz 2 nights, reviewing these messages that are so central to what it means to be a Jewish person. And the world is trying to convince us, to almost, you might say, gaslight us and say, no, You don't really have history, you don't have a land, you're new to the land, you don't really have morality, and none of it's true. Meaning, it's actually all started with us, and I think Pesach is an opportunity for all of us to review that. Um, these feelings have been even strengthened even more, I think, by especially, listen, even watching the way Jewish people have been, behaving and coming, parts of the Jewish people, I guess I should say, to the side of Israel, defending the Jewish people throughout the world, and certainly watching Israeli society. You can't say much about leadership, but certainly like your average person in Israeli society, watching the soldiers, for those of you who aren't connected to the experience of soldiers, either because you don't have children or cousins or nephews or whatever, you can't even imagine the great, not just bravery and strength and gvura of our soldiers, but also their great heightened sense of morality and sensitivity as they fought. It's really something which is incredible, truly incredible to see, to hear, and to talk with them, to hear the stories, and Bezrat Hashem, realizing this should be part of the zechus, both for the return of the hostages and the refuah for all those that are injured, refuah hanefesh. Unfortunately, there are many people who are nifkei nefesh and refuah saguf. We should all this period should be behind us. Okay, I want to move forward a little bit to talk about Pesach, and I was asked to talk about, as I mentioned before, some of the heavier issues, maybe the less inspiring issues, but the heavier issues of chametz, and I'll spend time doing hachsharat kelim, or koshering the kitchen. If I have time, I'll talk also about medicines, cosmetics, and things like that. And please feel free to ask questions or jump in at any time. I was thinking this year about how does one like every year, we're not going to talk about Bedikas Chametz, but every year Bedikas Chametz, I think to myself, what's my angle this year on Bedikas Chametz? Like, what am I really thinking about during Bedikas Chametz? Whereas I'm cleaning for Pesach, whereas I'm like scrubbing the cabinets or something. What's my angle? And I realize, I think, that there are three angles or three approaches, and I don't believe that one is more legitimate than the other. And I'm going to share them with you. And I think we all have to sort of determine where we're at. I think that for some, they plug into something which sort of what might call the spiritual messages of our little war against chametz. And we know that there are various sources. We're not going to review them now, but to talk about chametz being not just any non-kosher food, by representing the Yetzer Hara and the Avodah Zarah and haughtiness and anything which is the most bad in the world, we've attributed to chametz, and therefore not only do we try to eradicate it both physically, but obviously the goal is to do that spiritually as well. And there are others who are just very halachic minded, and they want to do what they think the halacha tells them, and they want to do the task. I think for others, they treat very much the avoda, I guess one could say, of cleaning for Pesach and koshering for Pesach and all of these tasks as part of their connection to previous generations. What did my parents do? What did my grandparents do? What did my great parents do? There are some people that it's so easy to convince them to just pour hot water on their countertop and kosher their countertop, which we'll talk about. And there are others that feel like their connection to Jewish tradition is to cover their countertops with layers upon layers of aluminum foil and other types of materials. And I don't think either approach is incorrect. So I'm saying, meaning I think that these are all different ways to sort of, get into the mindset of Pesach preparations, or in general, the Pesach experience. Okay, with that said, let's spend a few minutes talking about the kitchen and what types of things we should be looking out for, and how we can prepare our kitchen for Pesach. So when we speak about the kitchen as opposed to other areas of the house, in other areas of the house we have bedikas chametz, and we know that we're looking for cookies and basically pieces of chametz. I know that the custom has become it's not a recent custom, it's somewhat old custom to look for crumbs and really to do some type of a very thorough cleaning. But we know that by the letter of the law, we're only required really to look for pieces of chametz that one might violate ba'al yirah b'matzeh. However, when it comes to the kitchen, um, there are different, I guess, issues with different requirements. And I want to mention two of them. One of them is, of course, that our kitchen should be chametz free. The Gemara tells us, and most Rishonim paskin this way, that even a mashuhu, even the tiniest bit of chametz, is prohibited on Pesach, and chametz is not batel. It doesn't. If you have a mixture and a little piece of the chametz falls in on Pesach itself, it's not batel. It's not nullified. That's what they call the iser mashuhu. Most Rishonim paskin that way. Rabbeinu Tam didn't, the Sheilto didn't, but almost all Rishonim paskin that way. And therefore, unlike my bedroom, where okay, if there's a few crumbs on my night table, okay, that's not the end of the world. But when it comes to the kitchen, we try to be extra strict. That's first of all, one aspect of kitchen preparation. Another aspect, obviously, is those utensils that we eat on and that we cook on. You know what I'm saying? And therefore, we have to make sure that we're eating on kosher kalim and that we're cooking kosher kalim. And in that context, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about what's called hechsher kalim or hagalas kalim, because of course, one can just buy everything new, or one could go away to a hotel, I guess, but then you avoid all these problems. But if you're at home, you can buy new plates and you can have all sorts of, new utensils and appliances. But one doesn't want to do that, or one, wants to have a combination of maybe buying some stuff and using one's previous, the appliances in one's kitchen. We have to know the basic principles of hechsher kalim. So let me begin with the following. The Gemara tells us kibol ol kach polto, which means that the manner in which my kalim had contact with chametz, that is the manner in which I cleanse them and purge them and purify them from chametz. And the Gemara tells us that there are really two forms of koshering. One is called hagala, and one is called libon. Hagala means things that have contact with chametz during the year, with liquid as a medium, what we call bishul. And the way we kosher them is through hagala, and there are different types of hagala. If something is cooked in a pot, then you have to do what's called hagala, into a kli rishon and dip the pot into a pot of boiling water that's over the fire. However, if one's contact with chametz is only through what's called iroy, it was poured onto something, then it's a different type of hagala, which is through iroy. And then we have libun. The Gemara tells us that if something absorbed chametz or contact with chametz over an open fire, then we have to kosher it through fire. That's called libun. There's another type of libun that's called libun kal. We'll talk about that maybe. But those are the two types of koshering. It's called libun and hagala, or hagala and libun. Obviously, there are a lot of details in terms of hagala, how we prepare different utensils to be koshered. If we're talking about forks and spoons and things like that, it's rather simple. We just clean them and we don't use them for 24 hours, and then we put them into boiling water over a flame. However, there are other issues which come up, which I'd like to talk about now, and then we'll talk about different utensils or appliances in a couple of minutes. One of the major questions is to determine not just what form of koshering would be appropriate, but what materials can be koshered, because not every material can be koshered. And it's a bit of a challenge, because in the new world, they're constantly like new materials, which we'll talk about. We have to figure out whether they can be koshered. And I'll give you an example. The Torah tells us at the end of Sefer Bamidbar how metals can be kosher. You have this list of metals that can be koshered. On the flip side, the Torah also tells us that earthenware, things that are made with cheres, with clay, cannot be koshered. And in fact, if I have vessels that were used with clay, let's say they were used for cooking korbanot, and I worry that if I don't do anything with them, they're going to, the taste from the korban is going to turn into nosar. Nosar means that it was left over, and it's actually prohibited nosar. It's chayv kares. Then if it's a metal vessel, nechoshes, the Torah says I can kosher it. Murak v'shutach b'mayim. But if it's earthenware, I have to destroy it. We don't destroy, obviously, our earthenware vessels, but it just means that, as the Gemara says, they can't be koshered. So our two extremes, I guess one could say, are earthenware on the one side and metals on the other. But there's so many other materials which over the years the poskim have discussed. I'd like to mention some of them because it's important for us in terms of determining what can be koshered and what can't. For example, the issue of glass, which is very interesting. Glass actually existed in the time of Chazal, but they didn't talk about it in this context. Is machloket, whether what we do with glass. And there are actually three opinions in general regarding glass. One opinion, based on the Mishnah in Avos Derby Nasan, is that glass is shi'i, it's smooth, it doesn't absorb, and therefore I can literally, buy glass plates from a non-Jew that were used for lobster and pork and whatever, and I wouldn't have to kosher them. Just have to wash them off. I'd have to do tevilas kalim, which is a separate process, but glass in general doesn't require koshering. The other extreme is that there are some who viewed glass as like earthenware because it's made from sand, it's made from that which comes from the ground, therefore it cannot be koshered. And then there was a middle approach that said glass is like metal, can be koshered. The custom was that glass in general, according to this approach, wasn't, because until recently, most glass, if you were to boil it, it would explode and it would break. Therefore, it wasn't so feasible, it wasn't practical to kosher glass. And now we have Pyrex and things like that. But those are the three approaches. In practice, the Sephardic approach, as Rabbi Yosef Kara writes in the Shulchan Aruch regarding Pesach and the rest of the year, is to treat glass as a super material. It doesn't absorb, and you can use your chametz dishes that are glass for Pesach, and you have to kosher and etc. The Rama writes that the custom is to be strict and not to kosher glass. And there is a debate. First of all, what he means, number one. Number two, does he mean it only for Pesach? Because in general, we're more strict on Pesach, or does he is he referring to the entire year round? But just to review again, the Rama says that for Pesach we don't really kosher glass. There was a custom that people would kosher drinking glasses, which weren't used for hot beverages. How would they kosher them? They would do what's called iroi v'miloi, which means they would fill up their glasses in water. They leave them for 24 hours, then spill it out. They refill them. They would do that 3 times over 3 periods of 24 hours. And that was the way to kosher glass for drinking. I remember as a child, I guess seeing my parents do it, and I know other people have such memories. I don't think it's done that much nowadays, iroi v'miloi. But it certainly was a way that people used to kosher drinking glasses. During the year, incidentally, I know it's a Pesach shear, but you have a similar machlokas, whether glass can never be koshered, whether glass doesn't need to be koshered, which was the position of Rav Moshe Feinstein during the year, or whether one can kosher glass through Hagala. And that's certainly practical for, let's say, for Corel and Pyrex and things like that. That's a position, probably the position of most Achronim. Stone can be koshered, quartz and things like that can be koshered, and therefore countertops we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Wood, it's a little counterintuitive, but the Gemara says that wood can be koshered. Already the early Achronim were sort of a little bit curious about it. They said, listen, if the wood is soft and if there are scratches and there are holes in it and you don't really think you could kosher it well, you shouldn't kosher well, but you should kosher wood. But fundamentally, wood is a material that can be koshered. Porcelain, china, basically everything that we eat and drink with, mugs and plates and things like that. There's a question that goes back at least 500 years or 400 years, whether or not they need to be koshered or can be koshered. And it's a fascinating machloket. By the way, it's a double machloket because some of you may have encountered it regarding tevilas kalim. Does one have to tovel? Does one have to bring to a mikvah coffee mugs and these types of plates? And these questions are somewhat connected. Again, that's a topic for a different shir. The custom, I believe nowadays, is not to kosher porcelain for various reasons, mostly because it's viewed as originally being a form of clay, basically, that even though it's glazed, etc., and baked, and not to kosher it. But it was an interesting machlokat that was raging for hundreds of years. Even to this day, there are those who will kosher porcelain. There are those who b'di'evet in extenuating circumstances will kosher it. But the common practice is that you're koshering your kitchen for Pesach. People will kosher metal and they'll kosher, but we don't usually kosher china and porcelain. Um, so that leaves us with all of this information, trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do with my kitchen? Meaning, I have all these, appliances and things in my kitchen. What exactly am I supposed to do? So again, I'm not going to focus on the details of the spoons and the forks and the knives or the pots, but generally speaking, those things we do hagala to, although they can also be koshered by applying heat to them. For example, putting them in the oven at the highest temperature for 20 minutes, half an hour. But I'd like to focus more on the different kitchen appliances and things like that. So let's spend a few minutes going through them. Again, please talk up if you have any any insights or comments or questions. I want to begin with countertops. To be honest with you, I think that we make a bit of a larger deal about countertops than necessary. By the letter of the law, it's hard to see exactly what the problem with a countertop could be. You know what I'm saying? How is a counter really going to affect my kosher Pesach food? Um, but the custom is, and this is what appears in the Shulchan Aruch, is that we kosher tables and counters with iroi. Iroi means pouring water from a kli rishon onto the counter. That's the karadin, assuming that the countertop is made from a material that can be koshered. What materials can be koshered? If it's a stone, let's say if granite or something like that. Nowadays, a lot of counters are made by aggregates or like composite, where they grind up the stones and therefore they can make it into some type of uniform, um, some type of uniform um, pattern. You have Caesar stone, and you have all different types of countertops like this. It's a bit of a machloket, but I think the simple answer is that that can be koshered as well. Of course, there are those who wish not to kosher the countertop and to cover it with whatever people cover it with aluminum foil or whatever they do, and certainly that's a custom. But those who wish to kosher the countertop, if it's a material that can be koshered by doing iroi mikli rishon. There is a stringency that some achronim suggested of using what they call the hot stone. The basis for this is this idea that sometimes on the counter is put like hot solid food, which may have the status of a kli rishon. Therefore, the water should really be hotter than iroi. Therefore, there are those who had the custom of like pouring hot water over like a very hot stone from the fire, and it would keep the water even hotter. I don't know. That sounds a little dangerous to me. I don't really recommend anybody doing that. The simplest way, I believe, and the most effective for koshering a countertop, if you're going to do it, is to use one of those. In Israel, we would call it a kumkum. I think in America nowadays they sell them. It's one of the rare cases where like a nifty little gadget from Israel is becoming like an in appliance in America. These electric kettles, where you have the heating element inside the kettle, and therefore it's very similar to having that hot stone and just pouring over the countertop. The same is true regarding a sink. If a sink is made of a material that can be koshered, for example, stainless steel, then we wait 24 hours. The custom is to wait 24 hours from the last time hot chametz was used, and we pour hot water, over all areas of the stainless steel sink. If a sink is made out of a material that can't be kosher, like porcelain, many American sinks were made out of porcelain in the old days. Even in Israel, they were made out of porcelain. Those are much more difficult to kosher, or maybe impossible, and therefore, many people I remember from America as a kid seeing families that had sink inserts, like plastic basins, basically, that are put into sinks. But if one has a metal sink, certainly can be koshered as well. Um, Ovens. There's a debate, I guess one could say, sort of raging regarding the proper way to kosher ovens. There are those who believe that ovens need to be koshered through what's called libun chamor. Libun chamor would be the equivalent of a blowtorch, which I don't recommend doing to your oven. Or if one can't do that, then then the self-cleaning cycle. It gets up to 7, 8, 900 degrees Fahrenheit. What if a person doesn't have a self-cleaning oven? Or do we necessarily follow that shita? That position, by the way, was Moshe Feinstein's shita. So many poskim, it could be even most poskim, think that it's not necessary. You don't need to heat up your oven that hot. Rather, you clean it out well. You make sure you don't have these spills, or you have to clean around the door and make sure everything's basically clean. And turn up the oven to the highest temperature, whatever it is, 500 or 550, for half an hour, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, until it's at its hottest temperature and the walls become very hot. That's what's called libun kal, and that should be sufficient for koshering an oven, both for Pesach use and even if one moves into apartment or you're renting an Airbnb or whatever the scenario is, that effectively koshers an oven. Stovetops. Stovetops are becoming more and more challenging. In the old days, stovetops were all basically gas burners with grates. Grates, the truth is, don't really need to be koshered, but the Ramah writes that the custom was to kosher them through libun kal, basically to turn the fire on, and they should get really hot. If you have a gas stove, you can do that. You turn up the knobs, the gas, and have them burn for 20 minutes, or you can put it into the oven to the highest temperature for half an hour. However, nowadays, stoves, there's so many more stovetops. At first, you had the electric coil stovetops, which are also very simple to kosher. You just turn up the coils for 5, 10 minutes and they burn out. You have the glass stovetops, which have electric coils under them. I do not recommend pouring hot water over electric stovetops or any stovetops, to be honest. I know that some of the kosher folks say you should do that. Don't do that. Don't pour hot water on things. Things break, and then you find yourself in Erev Pesach with no stove. I don't know. I really don't recommend doing that. I think even in the glass stovetops, one can heat up to the highest temperature, put them up. There may be areas of the stovetop that don't really get hot. Okay, so don't put food there. Don't put pots there. Don't put your food there. But the areas that you put pots on would be kosher. In recent
I ask
years,
a question?
sure.
I want to know, are you able to put like the grates for the stovetop in the oven while you're also koshering the oven, or should you do them like separately?
That's exactly when you should do it. When you're koshering the oven, you throw in there the grates as well. And just like
Got
the
it.
kosher of the oven would kosher the racks in the oven, it also koshers the grates. Now, I don't know if I'd recommend putting the grates into a self-cleaning oven without asking someone first, because self-cleaning ovens are so hot and so powerful that often things that are put in there get warped, physically warped in terms of their shape, or if they have some type of coating or paint, it could come off. So I don't know if I'd recommend doing that. Or at least you might want to check first. But it would be sufficient to if you're koshering your oven by putting it up to the highest temperature, to throw your oven your stove grates in there. That certainly koshers everything. If they're clean, you obviously make sure they're clean. Scrub them a little bit. You could also put your pots in there if you don't think they'll get discolored. That would also kosher them as well. In recent years, a common type of stovetop is I think it's called induction, and there's no heat. It's all basically magnets, meaning I know basically the combination of the pot and the high intensity, like sort of magnet from the stovetop, sort of creates heat inside the pot. But the stovetop itself never really becomes hot. The question about how do you kosher such a thing like that? So you'll see different possibilities out there floating around. There are those who think you can't kosher. There are some who think that you should buy some type of silicon, like like thing to put your pots on that it's that it'll still heat it up. There's some who suggest that. There's some who suggest doing Eroy, pouring hot water on it. Don't do that. Again, I never suggest doing that. The simplest answer is that there's really no need to kosher it because there's no heat, meaning it never really becomes hot. However, those who are strict, I think it's reasonable to take your pots and put it on top of the induction, the stovetop, and turn them on. And the area under the pots will probably get hot because the pot itself gets heated up. Kibol okach poto. I think anything more than that seemingly is unnecessary. Things that are hard to clean, we don't really kosher. We don't kosher hand mixers usually. We don't kosher kitchen aids. I saw a friend of mine wrote an article on the internet a few days ago talking about koshering Ninja air fryer, pressure cookers. I got one of those a couple of years ago, and we love it, to be honest, all the time. Right? French fries, chicken, I don't know, making everything in it. However, I cannot imagine koshering it for Pesach. I don't know how you could possibly clean it well. I would not clean something like that. I just don't think you can get into the different parts and the fan and things like that. Things that you can't clean well, generally speaking, we say not to kosher. Any questions regarding kitchen? We went very quickly. I'm speaking very quickly, I know. Any questions regarding kitchen appliances or things that it may not be clear what the proper way to kosher them would be? Microwaves. We didn't mention microwaves. Dishwashers. Let me quickly do those. Microwaves. There are those who argue that microwaves are the easiest things to kosher because there's no heat in them. There are others who argue that microwaves are the hardest because it splashes and there's a fan in there, an event, and you can't clean it out. I believe the Derech HaMelech, and I believe that this is the way many are noheg, is to clean it out as best as possible, meaning in terms of the walls and everything, to wait 24 hours and to do Hagala. Now, you can't really do Hagala to a microwave, but the equivalent of Hagala for a microwave would be steam. And therefore, to put a cup of water in there, to put it on for 10 minutes, which fills the cavity of the microwave with steam. And then people often, they say to move the cup to a different part of the tray and to do the same. The only challenge with the microwave, if you're adopting that approach, is that the tray at the bottom is, that's a good question, is glass. And therefore, there are some who suggest koshering it. Some just remove it. Some have an extra one they got from, company when they bought it. I think that one can wrap it in like saran wrap or something like that. I think that is sufficient. Dishwashers and then hot water urns. Dishwashers. I've been watching the discussions of dishwashers go on for, I don't know, 20, 25 years probably. And what type of cup should I use in the microwave? You mean for koshering? It's a good question. Whether you use a chametz, I would use a chametz cup, meaning a clean chametz cup, boil water in it, creates the steam. I think that's sufficient. You could use a chad pa'ami, but I don't know. I think you can use a chametz cup. I don't think you need to use the Pesach cup. Dishwashers. I've been watching the evolution of dishwashers. So there are two issues with dishwashers, actually three. One is the material that the dishwasher is made with. In Europe and Israel, all dishwashers are made from stainless steel. In America, dishwashers used to be made of porcelain. At a certain point, the low-end dishwashers were made out of plastic. And you can have dishwashers also made out of stainless steel in America as well. So if you're going to kosher dishwasher, the first thing you have to ask is, do I have a material that can be koshered? We don't really kosher porcelain. What about plastic? So I forgot to mention before that there's machloket whether one can kosher plastic. Rav Moshe Feinstein was not really happy about koshering plastic for Pesach. But almost all Achronim disagree with him. And certainly outside of America, people kosher plastic. Certainly in Israel, hard plastic people kosher. And even in America, as I'll mention, I see more and more poskim who talk about koshering plastic. Dishwashers may be hard to clean, so you have to clean it well. What would be the method of koshering? The method of koshering would be to wait 24 hours, which is what we do whenever we kosher something through Hagala from its last cycle, and then to turn it on its highest cycle, the hottest cycle, to put obviously soap in there as well, and we assume that that's kibol o kach polto. Again, I've been watching the evolution where, like, I think 20, 30 years ago, all of these like American kosher guides were telling people not to kosher microwaves. At a certain point, I saw the OU tipped, they started teaching you how to kosher your, not microwave, sorry, your dishwasher. So, I guess consult with your local Orthodox rabbi, I guess, what they say, but that's certainly the way that people are told to kosher dishwashers. I'm just looking at the chat for a bit. Can you talk about hot water urns? A good question. So hot water urns, there are two types, I guess. There's sort of like the ones that are more like thermoses that have a Shabbos mode, and then you have like the full hot water urn that's sort of like metal with the top on it that's either metal or plastic. The thermos one, might be even easier. Nobody puts anything else in there. You don't put it in the dishwasher. There's nothing to do with it except water. Therefore, I think if one cleans it, one can use it for Pesach. What about a metal hot water urn? So theoretically, the answer is the same. I mean, there's no reason why you can't use it for Pesach as well. There are those who do raise the concern of the top. Why the top? Because there are those who have the custom of like heating up their challahs on top of the hot water urn. Once you start putting challahs on top of the hot water urn, things get a little bit more complicated because you actually have introduced chametz into your urn. I'm not really worried about any crumbs that fell into the urn. I don't know if it happens, but even if it does, they're all batel and they disappear. But the top should probably be koshered through Hagala and maybe wrapped in aluminum foil. I've seen people do that, wrapping it with aluminum foil, then putting it on top. But the urn itself should not really need koshering. I think that's the simple answer. Platas or let's say a plata, a heating plate, whatever, electric heating plate. So those can be cleaned well and turned on for 20 minutes, half an hour, and that really should be sufficient to kosher it for Pesach. I would understand if you want to keep a layer of aluminum foil on it, because sometimes there are spills and you feel there's a little chametz there, even though heating it up really should burn everything off. But fundamentally, a plata can really be kosher. Is one supposed to not use their microwave for 24 hours prior to koshering it? Yeah, because the method for koshering a microwave is hagala, so we do say you shouldn't use it for 24 hours. At least you shouldn't use it for chametz. If you forget and you realize that all you really did was heat up a cup of water for tea, we assume it's okay. By the way, people should also add, when you're koshering, it's probably best to add maybe like a drop of soap to the water, just game, but I don't think that's necessary, but there are those who suggest that. My understanding about platas is you kosher by a blowtorch. You can't blowtorch a plata. You may be referring to a blech. A plata, I don't know, it's electric. We don't really do, hopefully, I've never seen anyone blowtorch it. Theoretically, there's no need to blowtorch it because you don't put food directly onto a blech, right? Nobody makes toast. Well, maybe people do, but generally speaking, you put pots on top of it, and therefore it doesn't really need to be koshered because you're not cooking on it, and therefore it should be sufficient to clean it well and then heat it up. If you're talking about a blech, you can really put it over the fire until it gets very, very hot. If you're talking about an electric sort of hot plate, then you can, plug it in and let it heat up to it only has one temperature for 20, 30 minutes. We will be in an Airbnb in Israel for Pesach, assuming we should buy one when we get there. Sorry, let me read this again. My understanding of Platas is Yukasha no. If you're coming to Israel, there won't be any blech. Meaning we don't have blechs really in Israel. If you're in an Airbnb, it could be that the Airbnb, if it's like meant for Sabbath observant people, there may be a plata there. If you're there, you can really kosher it, an Erev Pesach if you need to, just to make sure it's clean and plug it in, for half an hour. Maybe put a sheet of aluminum foil over it for extra care. I think that would be sufficient. Generally speaking, we don't do Hagala after the fifth hour in Erev Pesach, which is important for those who are showing up, Erev Pesach to vacation homes. You can kosher an oven on Erev Pesach, but Hagala, after about the fifth hour, when they tell you to stop eating and really burn your chametz, after that, the minhag, for various reasons, is not to do Hagala. I think I answered the questions. Any other utensil questions? And then maybe we'll spend 5 minutes talking about medicines or something. Any other kitchen appliances or utensils or anything like that? I think if you're showing up at an Airbnb, I don't know what's going to be kosher there. Meaning, I don't know. You have to plan ahead, meaning what your game plan is in terms of, how much of the kitchen do you want to use? Do you need to cut? I don't even know whether the Airbnb is kosher. You have to see whether, the pots are kosher. So that's something to think about in advance. If you need help working through that, obviously feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so I want to spend 5 more minutes maybe talking about things that we have in our home that often we're curious about whether they have to be kosher Pesach. I think we'll wrap up this year. Obviously when we talk about food, so most people who live in countries that have a well-established, I guess you might say, sort of kashrut industry. So most products are usually have kashrut supervision, or there may be lists, right? If you're in certain European countries. But what about like sort of non-food products? So again, I want to spend a couple of minutes very quickly talking about medicines and creams and stuff like that. When it comes to medicines, there are two principles that the poskim employ. First of all, the halacha is that if I consume a prohibited substance, shelo kederech achila, not in the normal way of eating or benefiting from it, then it's only a rabbinic prohibition. For example, the Rambam says, or the Gemara says, that if I eat chelev, which is a prohibited fat, if I don't cook it, I just eat it raw, which is totally disgusting. That's not the normal way to eat it. Then that would only be a rabbinic prohibition. In that context, the Gemara tells us that ein misrapim or misrapim, meaning if I have things that one is not allowed to eat or derive benefit from, then I can use them for medicinal purposes. If for a chola, not a chola who's yesh bo sakana, which would be pikuach nefesh, I could do anything for that. Even a person who's sick but it's not life-threatening, then I can ingest, I guess one could say, a prohibited food, a shelo kederech achila. We don't have really these cases nowadays because our medicines are all in pill or shot forms. I'm saying? We don't really have foods that we view as medicines, so we have less of this. But there was a question regarding pills. Most achronim believe that ingesting or swallowing a pill is shelo kederech achila, and therefore, if a person is sick and they need to take a pill, even if it has chametz or if it has oyster shells or animal bones or whatever it has, then that would be permitted because that's for a sick person shelo kederech achila. But another consideration is that the Gemara tells us that if something is nifsal me'achilas kelev, if something which is not fit for canine consumption, that one is allowed to derive benefit from it on Pesach. It's not considered to be chametz. There is a discussion whether one can eat it for one's enjoyment. That's called achshebe. But medicine, we assume, is not for one's enjoyment. And therefore, if you put sort of, A and B or whatever together, most posts can conclude that pills are, in their pill form, are not ru'oi lachila. They're not really food. If anything, most animals would become sick if they were to eat or ingest medicines. And therefore, you're talking about something which is nifsal mechilas kelev, and you are ingesting it shelo kederech achila, and that led most poskim to believe that medicines in pill or capsule form are all permitted. They'll tell me, what about all the lists that are floating around out there, the Blumenkrantz list, and in Israel you have the Kupat Cholim list, and I don't know, there's a list out of LA, I know, in America, all sorts of lists. So my answer is as follows: don't use them. And if you were to ask most responsible rabbis in your communities, they would agree. They would say not to use them. There are certain things they may be useful for. Every year, people want to check whether Tums are kosher Pesach or not. But any type of real medicine the person is taking for a real medical condition, whether it be high blood pressure, diabetes, or prenatal vitamins, which we call them vitamins, but they're actually very important. Anything, any real medicine, antibiotics that a person is taking, one should not look at the list, and one should not look for replacement medicines. It's not a good thing to do. It could just cause trouble. So don't do that. The only questions are really twofold. One has to do with like liquid medicines and chewable things like that. Listen, usually speaking, usually liquid medicines are mostly for children, number one. And number two, the problem with them is often kitniot. I mean, in kitniot, I don't know. I don't know if there's a custom not to give kitniot in medicinal form to children, but there are those who are strict and they want to make sure that their children's Advil is kosher the Pesach. But if not, certainly, one should not hesitate giving it to a child. Regarding vitamins, I see there's a question regarding vitamins or supplements. There is machloket whether I view vitamins and supplements as food in pill form, or whether they're still considered pills and they're not considered food. And even in the world of the OU, for example, Rabbi Schechter believes that all of these things are permitted because pills are just not food. Where there are those who are stricter, and they think that when it comes to vitamins, one should really be careful regarding kashrut during the year as well. Calcium pills are made from oyster shells sometimes. Lactose pills, by the way, are often, almost always, I think, grain-based. There are those who refrain from taking them. I do believe that the Ikar din is really that they're all nifsal. But I know one should decide how important the given vitamin is. I don't know if vitamin C in April is such a crucial vitamin. On the other hand, prenatal vitamins, there's a reason why women are told to take them. It's not just a chumrah, I guess one could say. There's real concern about, folic acid and things like that. I would not suggest that people refrain from taking prenatal vitamins and things like that. There are supplements that maybe aren't so necessary, especially if they're in sort of powder form or liquid form. I would ask Shaila, I think, regarding them. High chairs for babies. Do you need to cover the table top part? It's a good question. The simple answer is that a high chair, listen, you can really just do Eroy. So I'm saying you could take a kettle and pour hot water on it, and it's really kosher, meaning that's the simplest thing to do. There's some who will cover it with like a plastic, type of cover. I think either solution is fine. I think either is fine. Baby bottles. I don't think baby bottles, you have to run out and buy all new bottles. Baby bottles could be koshered through Hagala. If you think that they can't be koshered, you're worried about them breaking or cracking or something like that, I think that you can continue using baby bottles. If you're worried that they were washed with chametz, so wash them in the bathroom during Pesach and then wash them in the kitchen sink, but I don't think it's something that one has to be too overly concerned with. That's in terms of medicines. In terms of creams and things like that, in recent years, the kashrut lists have chilled a little bit, and they most of them say in the beginning that all deodorants and shampoos and creams and ointments and things like that do not need any type of Pesach supervision is the wrong word, but even if they have chametz, it's not considered ro'oi lachila. The only areas where people are still arguing, they're arguing a little bit about toothpaste and mouthwash. Both of them, I know that Rav Soloveitchik thought that both of them were eno ru'oi lachilas kelev. I think that's a simple answer. Even if toothpaste have a pleasant taste, they don't really have a pleasant taste. They have a taste that prevents you from gagging when you put it in your mouth, but people don't really want to eat toothpaste, and therefore I think that a new tube of toothpaste is certainly sufficient. And there's no need to find necessarily what's called by the list a kasher l'Pesach tube. I think with that, we've done a very quick review of certain aspects of a Pesach. Obviously, we didn't exhaust it. I tried to speak as quickly as possible and squeeze as much information as possible into the hour we had together. But I think with that, I'm going to wish everyone a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and everybody knows how to find me if anyone has any questions or issues they'd like to discuss. And again, it should be a healthy, peaceful, enjoyable, meaningful Pesach. Okay. Garbany Sally with the
Thank you, Brofsky.
It's our granddaughter, Baruch Hashem.
Hey, look at that.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Brofsky. Shkoyach.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank